From We Run With You, I'm Kathy Wynn.
And I'm Rob Alvarez. This is Doing Good. This season, we interview brain aneurysm survivors and caregivers to learn how they are navigating new challenges and finding their own way of doing good.
When Laura Kern returned home from Keck Medicine of USC on March 19, 2022, she began her recovery by tracking two strangers, Dr. Russin and myself, running the LA Marathon that same day. Little did she know then that only a year after surviving a ruptured brain aneurysm, she would be running that same marathon with us. With a second chance at life, Laura continues to pay it forward by inspiring and helping other survivors return to what they love. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Laura. Welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Laura's coming straight to us from LA, California.
Maybe to give our listeners some grounding, um, can you tell us about what life was like for you prior to your ruptured brain aneurysm, which I think was what 2 years ago, or just a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Just a year and a half. Yeah.
Just a year and a half ago. What was life like in the late 20 teens and just before your rupture?
Yeah. I was reflecting on this the other day because the rupture happened sort of at the tail end of COVID. So it's almost like, what was my life like maybe through 2019? And then maybe right up leading up to the rupture was slightly different, obviously, as it was for a lot of us. So just to start out with, I am not native to California, but I have lived here since 2006. So, a fair span of my professional life. I came out to get my master's degree up north and then, ended up in Los Angeles and have been with Disney actually for going on 15 years. So not only do I have a lot of longevity at the company, but I've kind of built a life around that and actually met my husband while working at Disney right after I started in 2009. So we met through the Disney triathlon team, and that was when I first sort of had moved to SoCal, was excited about the prospect of breaking out of my gym workouts and enjoying the 365, swimming outdoors, biking, running, and, kind of spending more time out exercising outdoors. And so I had, I guess all the way through 2019 had been pretty active in starting out with sprint triathlons, getting into longer distances, and even doing an Ironman, which kind of propelled my interest in long distance running, actually. So I would, spend my days, working fairly long hours at Disney, and then, training, as well as, spending time with my husband, Steve, and our two golden doodles. And one of my other big passions, it was traveling. So I've been to, almost all the continents and, as far-flung places as Malawi and Tanzania, as well as extensive travel in South America. And that was one of the between that and triathlon being my big hobbies, it was a bit of a buzzkill when COVID hit, since those two things went right out the window. So up to the time of my aneurysm rupture, I was, spending my days, very long days, I would say at least 9 hours a day, almost consistently on Zoom, working remotely for Disney. And it was probably a fairly high stress time just because it was, a new way of working, and they were almost like the meetings packed in even more than they had pre-COVID in a weird way.
So a couple of follow-up questions. So were you always into running and outdoor sports kind of growing up?
Not really. I was marginally athletic, I would say. So I, went to an all-girls school growing up, and athletics at the time were not a big priority. It was mainly an academic focused school. And so literally you could walk onto the swim team, and we had what we called the aquatically challenged lane, which a lot of my friends and my older sister Amy were friends with, and they were so excited that they at least had the opportunity to join a team sport, even at a sort of non-competitive level. And I was sort of a middling level swimmer at that. So so it was more about keeping active, being involved in team sports, and staying fit.
And then so with COVID, did you focus more just on work since you weren't able to travel, and I guess there were really no triathlons or marathons at that
Exactly. I mean, so basically what happened is I got very into marathoning, and every time I would do the LA Marathon, I think I started it the same year you guys did. We established this in 2016
Mhm.
was my first running. And then after doing it for 3 years and beating my time by say 8 or 9 minutes each time, I thought, let's set a goal to qualify for Boston. And so in 2018, after doing LA, I then registered for Ventura and I achieved a BQ for the 40 to 44 age group. And that race was set to be April 20th, 2020. And that was one of the first things that got canceled in middle of March of 2020. And unfortunately, I was never able to realize that dream. And so things definitely cut off, by that point in terms of I didn't really have an interest in training for virtual races or anything like that.
Mm.
So I guess we'll jump to the day you had your ruptured brain aneurysm. What can you take us through that day? What was it like? How were you feeling that day and maybe the subsequent days?
Yeah. I mean, what happened to me, what's sort of interesting and maybe unique about it was that it was so immediate and so acute. So essentially, I started my Wednesday morning the way that I typically would when in this time of COVID, as I described, right? And I remember distinctly I had an 8 a.m. meeting, which had become increasingly common. I used to keep it to 9, but with the idea of not having a commute and being available at your desk, the meetings crept from like 8 to late in the night. But I wanted to get in a quick workout, in the morning. And so I was in our home gym and I was doing a very light TRX workout. We have it mounted on our ceiling. And so I, had been doing maybe a 30 to 40 minute TRX workout. And towards the end of it, I remember feeling completely dizzy and like the room started to spin. And I believe I went to go for the door and I then passed out. And so I woke up on the floor and sort of in a fetal position and in a complete pool of sweat. And I wasn't able to get up and I had like the worst headache of my life just from that moment. And I didn't actually know if it was from the fall, right? Because I was like, oh, I passed out and I fell. And maybe I hit my head and I was trying to figure out, do I have a bump? And, I was laying on the floor, just like totally confused and in a lot of pain. And then when I realized I was having trouble sort of moving around is when I started to get like much more frantic. And I realized something was gravely wrong and I was shouting help and it was coming out completely funny. Like it was coming out sort of truncated, if you will. Like it was, something wasn't right. And so luckily I had the wherewithal that, I had my Apple Watch on and I sent an incomprehensible blue, like just characters and letters to Steve, who was out walking the dogs. And he immediately called me because I don't normally send him texts with that many typos. I mean, sometimes they're still this was a little bit off. And he said, get off the phone with me and call 911. I'm on the way home. He had no idea what was happening, neither did I, but we knew something was gravely wrong. And so I was able to then use the Apple Watch to tell Siri to call 911 and stayed on long enough with them to communicate. I was again having trouble communicating, but enough for them to, I think, understand the address. And then hung up with them and then proceeded to have a very strange 10 minutes, I would say. Like I, again, didn't know what was happening to me, but I was pretty sure that with the feeling that I had in my head and the inability to kind of move correctly, that like the help wasn't going to come in time. And so I was like laying on the hallway floor and, in between thinking that I was going to die alone before Steve, was able to even come back to the house, which only took 5 or 10 minutes, I think. And definitely before the ambulance came, which was about 15, and doing like weird things actually at the same time that I don't remember. But he tells me that I got up and I unlocked the front door because I was like wondering if they were gonna have to bang down the door since I was home alone. when the paramedics came, apparently I also put on my jacket and decided that I was actually going to drive myself to the local hospital.
Wow.
I don't have a recollection of this, but I guess I was frustrated with, the fact that I wasn't just content to die alone in my house. I felt like a, desire to kind of do as much as I could to salvage the situation. But luckily, help did come, like I said, within 10 to 15 minutes. And, they were able to, assess me and take me to that local hospital, which is only about a mile from our house.
So it's amazing to me how impaired your brain was, and like you couldn't really speak clearly, but you were, I guess, coherent enough and able to think about potentially, dying alone. It seems kind of profound to have that thought, while you're, kind of laying on the, I know you were kind of probably busy instead of just being on the ground, you're kind of running around, but, throughout all that, right, you're kind of half conscious of what you were doing, but you remember that, thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible feeling. Like, that's the thing. I mean, everyone's experience is different, but for me, it was so acute they couldn't deny or put off or, explain away that something was really gravely wrong, which again, made me lucky, but it also created this experience where I was alone in my house, for a period of 10 minutes, pretty sure that, this was something that couldn't be overcome. And kind of, not really making my peace with that clearly, because I really wanted to try to do whatever I could to get help.
Well, I mean, I think obviously, because since you're willing to drive yourself to the hospital.
You can imagine how that would have gone, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, and just so that the listeners can understand the timeline, this was March. This was in March of 2021, right?
2022.
Oh,
2022, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
oh my goodness, I'm getting my I'm getting my time.
into,
Okay, March 2022. I kept thinking it's still 2022.
Yeah, I can't believe it's almost 2024.
Right?
You're
Okay.
getting there.
All right. Get it together, Kathy. All right. That was March of 2022.
Well, I guess that just kind of highlights too how I think amazing your story is, and we're going to get into it much more, but just the time frame of all this, that was March of 2022, and we're July of 2023, and we're here talking with you, and we're going to be talking about all the stuff you've already done so since. But just kind of back to that day. So did you feel any symptoms prior to that, or even the day before, like any headaches or anything? Nothing?
Not that I can recall. The biggest thing that, and again, it's hindsight, that I can tell is what I mentioned about like this period of stress in my life, I remember, it's just so random, maybe 10 days before it happened, walking the dogs, and they were acting up. I have two golden doodles that are 60 pounds. And so sometimes, they feed off of each other, and I was out walking them and I got mad at them, but I got like a different kind of mad where I shrieked at them, and it was like, it felt out of character, and it was like an overreaction, if you will. And I have no idea what that means, but it was, definitely an outlier kind of experience that I had. And then I was also stressed about some medical tests, that I'd had, that I, was waiting for some follow-up information on. And then the last thing was, I had actually, the month before in January, tried to do the Ventura Marathon again. And it was a very cold morning in Ojai, and in February for California. And I struggled the whole race, and I had like chest pain and really bad acid reflux. And I ended up quitting the race after 18 and a half miles, because I was worried about, if I had something wrong with me health-wise. And since then I had been going through a number of different, things that my doctor had advised with respect to checking out my heart health.
Oh, wow.
So that's actually part of the reason why I was doing TRX, is that I was not running, not doing anything crazy, just doing some light workouts and walking in the neighborhood during that time. So no idea medically if any of that was sort of, a preceding event or if it was totally unrelated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to tell whether that was the aneurysm kind of showing a little bit of its effects, or if how much of the stress you're going through with the way with going through the changes with COVID and with work, and how much that affects your, or how much that contributed to, I guess, the rupture
Yeah.
also. So
Yeah.
I guess we'll never know, but it's
Yeah.
it's
And
interesting to try to kind of connect these. um how was your, I guess, what was your experience like once you got to the hospital? Was what was the, where did you end up going, and what how long were you in the hospital for, and what did they end up uh treating you for?
Yeah. So it's interesting because everyone in my neighborhood, when the ambulance asks, in this case, my husband Steve, where to go, they always say to go to Huntington Hospital in Pasadena, because it's sort of known as being, the best place to go. It's farther away though than that hospital I mentioned that's a mile away. So my husband said take her to the closest hospital, which was USC Verdugo Hills. Again, the shortest ambulance ride that seemed like it lasted an eternity. And they have an ER where I was admitted, and um, you know, uh, probably within 2 hours, I would say, they tried everything from a pain perspective, and I kept on saying, worst headache in my life. And they had done their medical training because within about 2 or 3 hours, they had me do a CAT scan. So it was, fairly quick. And then my husband was in the waiting room because there was all sorts of COVID procedures, in place, I think at the time. And so we were communicating by someone's phone, not mine. And I remember them distinctly telling us the results and saying that there was bleeding in the brain. At which point, we all started to cry, and they brought him in, to the emergency room so he could be with me.
Wow. Yeah,
Um,
I think if all the survivors we've talked to, there's been so many different experiences, and just being aware of what's all that's going around you while you're in the emergency room and all the tests and getting that news, I think must be pretty tough to handle for I guess yourself. Like how she was not conscious at all. She
right.
didn't know what happened at
I
all
got
during
lucky.
that time. But
Yeah.
I wonder, do you recall kind of the first thought that came to mind when they told you it was you had a brain bleed?
Yeah. I mean, it was a sinking feeling because I think I actually had somewhat figured out that aneurysm could be one of the things that was happening to me, right? Amazingly. Uh, but it was a sinking feeling, And then I think to your point, like not only was I sort of aware enough to be told this information, but to see the reaction that my husband had, it was like devastating.
Mm.
you know the whole day he like and the whole experience of the hospital, he held it together, but like in a way that showed extremely grave concern while also kind of being pulled together and not losing it completely. But it was definitely a scary moment.
So I think, I'm assuming by then they were saying, all right, this is what we need to do, and got you the treatment that you needed.
Yeah. But I will tell you, it's a danger when you watch television and you see these things. You think like, okay, they figured it out. That means she'll be like airlifted to the nearest hospital that can treat her, and it'll be stat like that day, right? I mean,
Yeah.
why would you think anything else if you watch TV or movies?
Yeah.
So while it was very efficient and good care and did move along what you're saying, it was a lot longer timeline than we thought. So there was a period of monitoring where I think they did a second CAT scan while they were arranging for me to get a bed at the USC Keck Neuro ICU, just to see, I guess, the progression of, if it was getting worse or more diffuse in my brain.
Mm.
And so I don't know exactly how much time passed, but they did come in and say, we can't treat you here, but there's a bed for you at USC Keck Neuro ICU, and we'll transfer you there. And I don't remember much after that, but I do know that I spent the night there and then had a procedure the following morning to coil the aneurysm in my internal carotid artery. So.
So how long were you in the hospital? What was recovery like for you?
So I guess they had told me all along that the standard was that I would be in the neuro ICU for 2 weeks. It was sort of just the standard, right? Like, people are doing better, maybe just have a different experience, people are doing worse. And so that was sort of the expectation. And I was in the neuro ICU for about 6 days. And then they said, we're transferring you to a step down room. And I was there for another 4 days and then left on, I think, day 11, after the original aneurysm. So I was, I guess, above the standard, which was hard for us to understand because we thought I'd be in the hospital for 2 weeks and weren't quite prepared for home care. But essentially, I just had to build back up my ability to do everyday tasks, right? Like the brain wasn't really working very much. I, could watch TV, but not really like do much cognitively, although no deficits, physically no deficits, but I, could barely walk down the block, right? When I got to that step down room, it took me forever to do like one little square. And my 75-year-old mom made it around twice as fast as I did when they came to visit. So other than that was sort of the main thing. And obviously I had, pretty severe headaches, as I was recovering, and just my body was dealing with the fact that there was a sort of, however profuse it was, bleed, for a day before they were able to coil it. Just to, recover from that took a lot, but.
Yeah. So when did you start thinking about how this might change your life, or how you wanted to get back to, to your normal life, work and running and triathlons and
I mean, was that
your
even,
puppies?
or was that even, the whole activity part, was that even in your mind? Was that even something that you could even think about, or too scared to think about? Because I know I was.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think the first thing was probably work because I had to figure out how to go on medical leave and what that meant. Because I mean, there's some crazy emails that I sent from that first ER that I don't remember sending to my assistant and to others, but I have them since they're emails, right? And I can read them. And it's like, before the CAT scan, it's like, oh, I think I had an aneurysm. And then it's like, because they were telling me, as I said, that there was 2 weeks in the hospital, I was like, well, I'll be out 2 weeks. I didn't understand that like that meant 2 weeks in the hospital and then, medical leave.
You'll have to recover and everything too.
Like, I mean, I wasn't clearly thinking straight. I don't remember sending these emails, but they were there. So I was trying to figure out, how long I'd be out. And, you just sort of cut off when you go on medical leave, right? Obviously from a personal level, people were concerned and you can send texts, but you're really not supposed to be on your work email or working because you're effectively on disability. And so clearly I got my, expectations reset around that. And knew that I had at least, the 12 weeks or whatever, to kind of think about, to what we were saying earlier, it hadn't been easy, although I love my job, during the COVID time in particular, and things had really gotten too crazy from a calendar and work perspective, I think. So I think that reflection happened pretty soon, that if I did choose to go back, that I'd have to have a different way of working to make it a little bit more manageable. And then I did have, it's weird, but I did have I had probably some of the craziest questions that the neurologists and neurosurgeons were ever asked. both while I was in the hospital, which was around, could I get back to doing a marathon or doing a triathlon? And then in my follow-ups, I asked even crazier questions like, it had always been a dream of mine to save up money to buy a ticket to go to space with, Virgin Galactic or one of these companies. And so my list of questions was pretty deep, from scuba diving to going to space, and what can I do with coils, and what maybe do I not want to be the first or even the 10th or 50th person with coils to go ahead and attempt.
So,
wow.
so what did they say to
They
the
haven't
space
said
question?
no to anything other than maybe I should maybe put the space on a sidebar,
Maybe a couple years down the line. Now, I would like to take a step back since, well, I was also at Keck Medicine. So give us a little background on what happened there and our connection.
Yeah. So Keck Medicine was just a wonderful, wonderful place. I didn't actually meet my neurosurgeon until after I left the hospital for whatever reason, but the care team was amazing, as were the neurologists and the residents, and even the person who came to take your whatever it was,
Your
like
stitches? Your staples?
I didn't have staples because it was interventional, but they listened to your arteries and
Ah,
the
okay.
waves to see if the blood flow was normal, like every morning, of course, at 5 a.m., right?
Oh
Just
yeah,
like when they
the
came to
The
ultrasound, I think. Yeah.
ultrasound. Yeah.
yeah,
An ultrasound.
exactly. Um, and obviously the nurses, like so caring and wonderful. And I remember, towards the end, probably one of the last days when we were sort of preparing that I might be discharged. The day that I got discharged was the day before the LA Marathon. And I remember talking to, Dr. Bulick about Dr. Russin, and, giving her the okay to get in touch, because Dr. Bulick is like a wonderful, neurologist. I think you guys
Yeah.
know fairly
I
Yeah,
well.
think
she
she
was
was she a fellow at that
she
time?
was a fellow at the time, and she was
Yeah.
yeah, she was actually the first doctor I talked to when we got to Keck, when Kathy arrived, like after midnight, and she was there waiting, and she just they took Kathy in, and she said, don't worry, we'll take care of her. And I was, of course, frantic. I was like, what's gonna happen? Oh, this other hospital told us this and this. She's like, we're gonna do everything we can to figure out what's wrong, and we're gonna fix it, so don't worry. I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
even
awesome.
though she was a fellow, she had to like redo all of her training, right? She was a practicing doctor in her home country, and then came here and basically started all over and worked her way back up to being a professor and full doctor. Anyway, so she knew about my background, knew that I wanted to get back to running. She had said, okay, not this year, but in 2023, yes, you could plan to do a marathon. And then said, hey, there's a neurosurgeon here by the name of Dr. Russin who does this crazy stuff with a former patient, Kathy. And if you're willing, then I'd be happy to connect you with him. When you get out of here. And I think she had also mentioned that LA Marathon was, a sort of a tradition for you guys to do, to raise money for Keck in the past, and that you guys were running it together. And so I did go on my first full day at home, when I was basically told to, act as if I was still in the hospital, but I was in our guest room, getting sort of table service from Steve. I tracked you guys, the whole way that you did the LA Marathon together until you finished, even though I'd never met or spoken to either you or Dr. Russin.
That was yeah, I did not know that you were tracking us. I didn't know anything about you until I think several weeks
Mhm.
later. I think
Yeah.
in April or so.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was just I mean, what that's such a wonderful coincidence. And
Yeah, it's amazing coincidence that
yeah.
it was the LA Marathon that was happening while
Yeah.
you or well the day after you left
Yeah.
the hospital.
Yeah.
It was going on while Kathy was in the hospital in
Right.
2015, like
Yeah.
in the
Right.
middle of it. And we're like, we look out the window and we're like, what are all these people doing running outside? It's like, oh, it's the LA Marathon.
That's what I was thinking was going to
Yeah.
happen, but then they discharged me early. So,
Yeah, you're like, can I stay one more day?
Well, not to, let's not to have a spoiler alert, but am I gonna? Can I talk a little bit, or
Yeah.
am I gonna spoil? Well,
So what?
no,
Go ahead.
no, not spoil. But what I was gonna say is, it's just such a cool coincidence to meet you at that time because, my aneurysm was also in March, right around the time when, well, mine was the 8th, yours was the 9th.
yep.
2015 for me, 2022 for you. And yeah, so it's so cool that we met, we spoke, we finally got to meet each other on one of our LA trips back to California. And I was just like, man, this is so cool because I don't recall when exactly when you emailed or when you asked me to come back. I apologize to LA Marathon right now, but I wasn't a fan of the new course and I wasn't planning on going back in 23, right? This year.
Right.
And I recall, yeah. And when you asked if we can come back and run it with you or you can join, we run with you, I was like, absolutely. I'm going to go get my tickets. I'm going to go ahead and register. And the spoiler is less than a year. In less than a year, you went and did your comeback race, just like I did, in 2016. And how cool is that? That your first LA marathon was in 2016, and my first LA marathon was in 2016. Little did we know that I'm not good at math.
I think we knew that.
that a couple years plus we would meet each other, two
Yeah.
aneurysm survivors sharing our story and running with each other. And it was so special for me, especially going back and running with you on your comeback. That was what We Run With You was all about. So I could not be there to witness it.
So yeah, we'll
Yes, we'll
get
talk about it
into all
later.
that more. I'm ending up going through this a lot more chronologically than I even anticipated, which is good. But I wanted to hear more about what your experience was like in that first, um, 3 to 6 months after you came back home. What was trying to get life back to normal like, or even if did it even get close to back to normal
Mhm.
for
It
you?
probably did by the end of that time frame, which is crazy. We were just taking it day by day, from the beginning days of being worried about taking my medicine every 4 hours and, staying in bed to starting to slowly, get up more strength and an initial goal. Again, I wasn't working, so I was just sitting at home, usually just watching TV, trying to take as much brain breaks and sit outside in nature and stuff as possible because I didn't really have the energy, obviously, or the capacity to really do anything major from a cognitive perspective. Um, was to get enough strength to be able to walk those 260-pound dogs that I mentioned before, because I certainly couldn't have done that right when I got home. They would have toppled me over, and I would have fallen. But so that was kind of how I spent my time, is just resting as much as possible and building up the ability to walk um, longer distances and feel secure in my balance and strength, that it was coming back. And then I think I did, when something like this happens to you that was so traumatic and acute, that makes you take a step back immediately from work, right? And it's like any project I was working on, it's like poof, someone else has to take care of it now, right? Like what seems so important, that 8 a.m. meeting that I missed, by the way, just to circle back to that was some of those weird emails I was sending. Please apologize to the client that I missed at 8 a.m. because the ambulance was in my house and I was having a ruptured brain aneurysm. I'm so sorry to inconvenience you.
Oh my gosh.
That all kind of went away. And, you have to have a moment where you feel like you need to think about, like, am I doing what I want to do with my life, or do I love my job that much, or should I think about doing something different? And it's not a cop out to say that I actually like reassessed. They couldn't have been nicer, at Disney about, clearly just being so concerned about what happened to me, and so in shock and disbelief that they wanted to make sure that I took the time I needed to be okay. Then I actually decided that it was the place to be, as I was coming back from something like this, that I knew that they would have my back, if I needed to have additional accommodations or whatnot as I got back up to speed, that they seemed genuinely grateful just to have me, okay. And if I did want to come back, to have me back on the team and contributing. And so I ended up, going back, and I left medical leave shockingly early. I started working again at some point in April, when the doctor said it was okay.
That's fast.
That's very short. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got a note saying that I could work 2 hours a day. And what I found was I couldn't work 2 hours a day the way I was describing before on a Zoom. Like, cognitively, I learned Zoom is actually really hard. You're sitting there, as I am right now, focusing on how I look, how you guys look. A lot of times a deck or a presentation is also being shared on the screen. And to be able to try to track all of that, I didn't know until after I had a brain injury, is actually very taxing on all of us, even those that don't have a brain injury. And no wonder I was feeling so run down and stressed after, 2 straight years at home, doing this every day with 0 breaks. I'm not even kidding. It was back to back to back. So I would join calls or, be available if people needed to chat. And then I slowly worked my way back up. They knew if I needed to join a Zoom, I wouldn't join on camera, just to try to cut back on the number of things that I'd have to sort of process. And then eventually I worked my way back up to 8-hour days. But to this day, I manage my calendar very differently with my assistant and, make sure that I'm not getting back into that same situation where I just have back to back to back meetings with no breaks to think or to do solo work or catch up or just have a moment to breathe.
So what do you think kind of drove you to want to get back into running so much that it was even in your mind before you even got discharged from the hospital?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's just that inner determination that we have as not only runners, but as Ironmen. When you're faced with something like that, which honestly, I have to say, we didn't get into my whole life story, but essentially, like, there was nothing that would even come close in terms of an adverse event or challenge that I'd had to face up until this happened to me. So, it was definitely the fact that I came back and didn't have any lasting deficits, kind of was another motivator to me to make sure that I got back to doing the things that I love. So I think it was probably compounded. It was just, as I'd also described, an interesting time with COVID. I felt like I basically put my life on hold for 2 years. We were very COVID cautious, very, very sort of pro-mask, pro-vaccination, not because we're both introverts, naturally just kind of gravitated to, okay, I guess we don't go out to restaurants anymore and we don't socialize unless it's outdoors. And life had become very limited, and it was almost like a 2-year pause. And it was a wake-up call that even though COVID was still going on, I had to get back to doing things I love. So I think that COVID kind of compounded it as like, okay, races are back, right? It's 2022. We can accept some level of risk at this point, in our lives to kind of make sure that you don't know how much time you have, and, you want to make sure that you're living each day to the fullest.
Did you have at any point, like during those early days of recovery, did you have a fear that you wouldn't be able to get back to, doing during marathons and triathlons, Ironmans?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm honest, I'm still scared, but I'd go out and I do it every day. But I was incredibly scared because I didn't understand, I had the most lovely neurosurgeon in the world who I did meet, after sort of in my follow-up appointments, and is, in charge of my follow-up care to this day. who will spend as much time as needed with Steve and I, like drawing out, this is your aneurysm, this is what it looks like, and this is the blood flow, and this is the coils, and just making sure that I not only understood that, but had all the questions that I mentioned that I had answered, to the complete fullest. It's still different to know that it's possible and to go out and do it. I had a lot of fear about what's going to happen if, for whatever reason, my heart rate goes above a certain level and I, start to, really kind of work myself up, and it'd be beyond just like maybe a walk or even a light jog didn't scare me as much as actually the thought of like running that first mile.
Mm. Now, a lot of the aneurysm survivors that I've met through the years, they would, some were, amateur runners and cyclists. A lot of them would always share with me that, they were always worried to get back to doing something active because they were, of course they knew that it wasn't going to happen, but it's just that fear that the coil is going to unravel or it's going to rupture again, or you're going to do something so strenuous to your body that you would cause another aneurysm. Was that something that you've ever experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if this is the difference between, like if it's the same if you've had a clipping, if you feel better about yourself somehow. I mean, I guess to your point, there's always the risk of another one, but the fact that I still have an aneurysm, right? It's just, held into place with these coils that are miraculous, is maybe a little bit of a different dynamic because it's like, okay, it's still there. And it's always there every day when I go out and run. And I think the only thing that helped me was, was Kathy's training plan essentially is like, okay, don't think about running the mile. Think about going out and doing, the 2-minute jog and 2-minute walks, right? Or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always stop if you feel dizzy or you get a headache, right? Absolutely stop.
Exactly.
Don't complete the interval. Don't pass go, just stop. And, take it in those bite-sized chunks so you can get the confidence. And also in my case, probably the endurance since I was, a little weak.
Yeah. Oh no, I was very proud of you. Every time I gave Laura something and then I would see her snap a photo of her garment, I was like, wow. I was like, geez. I caught myself trying to compare. I know. See how competitive I
Like
am.
12-minute miles.
Wait,
She's gone to 11.
what was I when I first started? No, I was very proud of you.
Well, you're
But
just
yeah,
kind of gauging her
yes.
just to make sure you didn't have to worry about her, right? Not to go too fast.
Exactly.
But so I mean, yeah, again, back to like how short the time frame of this is. So you have to work your way back into a pretty demanding job or career.
Mhm.
Then you've got the idea, well, let's start training for a marathon. And then to add to that, we ask you to be a part of We Run With You as part of the board.
Mhm.
I guess what I was curious about is what, with all that going on and, just having, being so, so having your brain aneurysm so recent, what made you agree to be part of We Run With You and part of the board?
Yeah, I mean, that was a good segue from just describing like how instrumental it was in getting me off of I can't do it, to starting with the getting back into the jogging and the running, with Kathy's support that I mean, how could I not? That's really what helped me get back to doing what I love. And I would have loved nothing better than to be a part of helping others do that. I think another thing that maybe Kathy and I share is that, coming out of the hospital, knowing the odds of, even making it to the hospital and getting the care that I did, being so grim, and then coming out with no, sort of physical or cognitive or speech deficits, then there is a little bit of survivor's guilt as well, too, and wanting to be able to pay it forward to help people who may not be in the same situation, but still have the dream of getting back to, and it's probably more challenging for them, obviously, to get back to their daily life and the things that they love.
So fast forward to I guess, March of
this year.
this year.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, Kathy, hinted at earlier, you had your comeback race at the LA Marathon, with Kathy, Dr. Russin. And can you take us to that day, or even maybe that weekend, what the anticipation was like and what that morning was like getting ready, to total line again, your first marathon since, and what was that whole experience like? If you can take us through all that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably was not as nervous as I normally am before a race, if I'm remembering right. So everything kind of went like clockwork in terms of, our plan of you graciously driving us three amigos to to the course and having just enough time to kind of do what we needed to do, but not so much time where you're getting that antsy feeling and, oh, do I have to go to the bathroom one more time? And should I be stretching? Or there's people jogging and warming up? And it can be overwhelming. It was almost more like Zoom, like we just were super focused, did what we need to do, took our pictures, and there was no time to kind of think about anything else, I think, until the gun went off. And it honestly was like doing my first marathon. And that's sort of how I was approaching it in my head. As you say, it's a comeback. There's no expectations other than to finish and to have, a great time and really soak it all in and appreciate the fact that I am back and I get to do this. And, all those signs that people hold up that have messages along those lines along the way, like I never looked at them as much and appreciated them as much as I appreciated the thousands of people that come out and support that course. Even if it's not the best course, it is the best energy. So I think when times were tough, we still fed on that and fed on you and my family's supporters, being out on the course, and friends that we run with you, finding us at various places to kind of bring our energy back up. I had forgotten that I hadn't done LA since 2018, and I forgot I had done Ventura, which there's nary a spectator. And so it's okay, you're BQing, but it's a totally different experience where it's all about the hurt.
Mm.
So what was going through your mind as you crossed the finish, or you approached that finish line, knowing you were there and you did it, you've completed your comeback race?
Yeah, I mean, I was just overwhelmed with gratitude. The official photographers, as you guys know, captured a lot of photos of us throughout the day, because Kathy and I were hand in hand across the finish line and side by side throughout the entire race. And they captured a photo of me as I crossed the finish line, breaking into tears. So, but tears of, gratitude and happiness, obviously. And, maybe a little bit of relief. It's always a good thing to be able to stop running. And, I don't know. I was going to say something else, but I forgot.
Were you like during the race at all, or anytime, or just after, did you allow yourself some time to kind of reflect how far you have come, even in just the short 12 months since?
Yeah, definitely. I remember what I was going to say. I don't think I realized it. Definitely not when I had that first conversation with Kathy about, will you run LA in 2023? Not even as I was training. I didn't, until maybe that weekend when we were together getting ready, did I have the thought that March 19th, 2023 was a year to the day from my discharge from USC Keck. It was Saturday of the prior year, the day before I, tracked you guys running. And so I think that just, I love dates and numerology as much as the next person. And that was just like, it made it especially meaningful to think, wow, it's been, 365 days ago. I have a video that Steve took when, he drove me home from the hospital after getting discharged, and he's opening the front door and the two dogs are greeting me. And you can just see in this minute-long video that they knew I hadn't been home in almost 2 weeks. It wasn't just a, hi, how are you? It was something special. So
Yeah, it was, where have you been?
we thought you were never coming back.
What's next, and what are you looking forward to, or what new challenge or next challenge are you most looking forward to in this next chapter?
I'm allowed to say the one thing, but but yeah, I mean,
One
aside
little
from
thing.
What's that one little? Yeah.
um, I mean, yeah, there's definitely additional challenges like getting back into triathlon. Next month, I'm getting back in and doing my first triathlon in what will be 5 years. It's a local-ish race in Santa Barbara called the Santa Barbara Triathlon. It's sort of its own distance of a mile swim, a 36-mile bike, and then a 10-mile run in one of my favorite places, on this planet. So I'm definitely nervous about swimming in the ocean because if you don't swim in the ocean, there's a 0 chance to get eaten by a shark. But if you swim in the ocean, there's a non-zero chance. But once I get out of the water, I think it'll be hopefully a fun return to racing. So there's definitely new challenges like that, but probably also outside of, training, which does take up a lot of my free time, I'm realizing. Then I'd also love to be able to do what Kathy did for me and to be able to help other people who are in this situation in whatever way I can, get back to doing what they love and really pay it forward. I had a couple months ago a business school reunion, and you kind of expect sometimes you go to these things and it's like, oh, what's your job and what's your status and how wealthy are you, and kind of all the superficial things. And I was really surprised and humbled by the number of people who follow my Instagram and who I hadn't spoken to since the last reunion 5 years ago, that took the opportunity to either come up to me or in the course of conversation tell me how much they appreciated my post and were inspired by my story, and so, sort of were supporting me, even if I didn't even know it.
How do you think your life is different now than it would have been if you hadn't had a ruptured brain aneurysm?
Yeah, I know. It's interesting because I've described a lot of the things that sound like either it's sort of the same, right? I have the same job and I'm getting back to doing things I did before, right? It sounds like a lot of more of the same, but I think there are definitely undeniable differences in the way that, I sort of live my life day to day in terms of not letting the things, bother me that probably would have normally, particularly at work, but also in life. I literally, like, I realize that I go and do my job because I love the people and I find it interesting, and I would be bored out of my mind if I didn't. And I approach it that way versus like I have to go there, or, I have no other option. And just having that mindset sort of changes, a lot of things, not everything. There's still stressful moments. And the same with life, just trying to remember to treat people with kindness and, give them the benefit of the doubt, and, just having that kind of appreciation for the sort of second life that I was given, and everything that I do, like, is definitely, while you may not sort of, see it on the surface all the time, then it's definitely there, sort of underpinning every day for me.
Do you have any, I guess, words of advice or perspectives you can share with someone that may be going through something similar that you went through, a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me, and again, this might be personal to me, but I feel like um, even though this thing that happened to me was so horrible, it's also like I feel so lucky in a way that it did happen to me. I know it sounds weird to say, but because of what's come out of it that I wouldn't have had otherwise, and because the outcome was, so good in my case. So, I think it's very hard. It's very easy to feel sorry for yourself or think, why did this happen to me? And obviously, like, people are justified in feeling that way, but to be able to come out of it and kind of turn it on its head and see the positive in the experience has been really helpful for me, just overall in my life and my well-being.
If I would have to say to anyone who is going through what we've gone through, it's, it does get better. It does get better. You just have to be patient and you have to give yourself grace. Um, yeah. And what you said, in terms of feeling lucky, I know it's the weirdest terminology to use in our case, but I do feel lucky because, this may sound a little corny, but, I get to meet individuals like you. We're great friends. We're going to be doing another big race together. Don't know if you want to share that, Laura, but this is why I love Laura. Should I go ahead and just, why I love Laura so much is, well, so, Dr. Russin was supposed to do Ironman California last year, but I think he trained a little too hard and tore his meniscus or something. Anyhow, and I said, "What?" I said, "I can't do another Ironman back to back." So I said, "I'll do it next year," meaning 2023. And so, of course, he couldn't defer with Ironmans. You can't defer. So he said, "All right, if you do it, I'll do it." So we're going to be doing Ironman California in October of this year. And guess what I go and do? I I send Laura a text and I said, "Hey Laura, we're gonna do Ironman California. You want to do it with us?" And Laura replies back, "Sure." And I was like, "Yes." I love her. I love her so much. So yeah. So how excited are you?
I'm pretty excited. Yeah, that was only 7 months after I got out of the hospital, and I think I was running maybe a mile or 2 at the
Yeah,
time, right?
right?
So that's pretty crazy that was quite a leap to say that I will do my second Ironman, which will definitely feel like my first. But I am looking forward to that part of it. I'm looking forward to the non-ocean swim,
Mm, me
and
too.
downriver, and just getting out there again with you guys and being the crazy people that we are that would sign up
Yeah.
for such a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Be part of the tribe and do crazy things with We Run With You. That's a
Yeah.
way to live life, right? Do something crazy.
I think listening to kind of how you've described the past year, you know, to one, it may seem like, oh, had a, you're into the hospital, you recovered, and back to work, and very quickly, and back to running. And I think it's a little bit, you know, at least in my opinion, you kind of downplayed it a little bit because I think it's a huge deal, and I think it's something special, and also your desire to want to help others, and I for one am looking forward to not only what you guys are going to do later on this year, um, but I think all the things that I know you will be doing to help others, um, that are looking to get back into their normal life or getting back to doing what they love. I know you will do that for so many others, and hopefully, we could do together as we run with you. And I am definitely looking forward to that. Well, I know you will do special things because you've already done so many special things in the
Yeah.
year of recovery, and um, and I'm so thankful that you're sharing that with us. So thank you. And
Thank you guys.
any last words you want to share with the listeners before we end?
No, I mean, I just echo everything you just said. Again, part of when I said I was lucky is that the fact that I was able to meet you guys through the crazy series of coincidences that we described. So I appreciate the opportunity and enjoy the conversation with you guys.
Yes, same
Same
here.
here. Yeah. We Run With You is a nonprofit with a mission to improve the lives of people suffering from brain injury and disease by funding research, raising awareness, and providing support for survivors and their families. Find out more at werunwithyou.org. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a comment or review. Until next time, keep doing good.